The senator was shot on a college quad. The ledger points to money, roofs, and a powerful firm. Welcome back to the Untold Struggles, the channel that pulls back the curtain on injustice and the stories the headlines miss. Today's episode reads like a political nightmare. A rising senator gunned down in broad daylight at a college plaza, a manhunt for a rooftop sniper, and a town split down the middle. Stay with us, because what looks like chaos at first will reveal a system of power, a hidden ledger of enemies, and one underdog who refuses to be dismissed. Hit subscribe, you'll want to see part 2. Senator Charles King had a grin that worked like a flashlight. Tall, quick-witted, and magnetic in public, he'd risen fast. 3 terms in the state legislature, a string of populist bills, and suddenly a nationwide profile. He called it the American Renewal Tour, rallies, college town prove me wrong events, and long nights of interviews that ran like wildfire across cable channels. On a crisp September morning, he spoke at the quad of Western Ridge University in Cedar Hollow, Utah. October air bit at the edges of the banners. Students leaned over the low stone walls, flags fluttered, and security cordoned off the stage. Charles spoke of unity and reform, of laws that might change the course of the state. Cameras recorded every phrase. From a distance, the crowd watched a man they trusted. From farther away, hidden in the fissures of brick and rooftop, someone watched with different intentions. At 12:23 p.m., a single, impossibly precise shot cut the bright air. It hit the stage like an executioner's gavel. Senator King slumped forward, blood darkening his linen shirt. Panic roared. Students screamed. Security scrambled. The initial shock was followed by a grim, electric realization. This was not random. This was a calculated strike. A sniper from above, a quiet plan, a vanishing footprint. The plaza turned into chaos. A high-powered rifle was later recovered hidden on a neighboring rooftop. Shell casings glittered like sinister confetti. The state police cordoned off the campus. The governor called it an assassination. Politicians scrambled for statements. Nationwide, commentators pivoted into frenzy. Enter Maya Hollis, a junior investigative reporter for a small but tenacious independent outlet, The Ledger. She wasn't supposed to be the one leading the narrative. Big outlets arrived with pre-assigned camera rigs and X-rank analysts. But Maya had roots in the town. She'd interned at the student paper, had friends who'd recorded the event on their phones, and she'd spent months on campus digging into local networks. She'd been covering Senator King for weeks, watching a thin line of threats shove into his social feeds. She believed the threads pointed somewhere deeper than a lone lunatic. Maya was the underdog because she had neither money nor connections. But she had time, stubbornness, and a belief in records, and a knack for reading small patterns as though they were spelled in neon. The official story, crafted hours after the shooting, placed blame on a lone sniper. But public grief split fast into factions. Some called him a martyr. Others blamed the senator's fiery rhetoric. Elected officials used the tragedy like a lens. For some, it was a reason to clamp down on protests. For others, it was evidence that the political climate had turned combustible. The first glaring irony landed in the press room when a local police sergeant spoke on camera. "We are deeply committed to justice. We must not let this be manipulated." A week later, leaked footage would show a police commander dismissing a tip as noise days before the assassination, a comment buried like an unpaid invoice in an internal chat. Maya collected the little things. A rooftop maintenance report showing a questionable permit, a delivery record for roofing materials tied to a private contractor, a scanned receipt from a pawn shop selling a high-powered bolt-action rifle 2 towns over. People in the senator's circles confessed that King had lately received odd threats, but the finger of suspicion swayed in many directions. Donors who'd felt betrayed by his reform platform, extremist podcasters who called him a turncoat, and opponents who didn't like his chosen alliances. But one small lead made Maya sit up, a campus security guard's log entry marking unusual activity on the building 2 days earlier. The time matched a maintenance crew that, according to phone records, had been paid by Whitaker and Dunn Holdings, a shadowy property firm with deep ties to the state's political circle. The same firm had recently lobbied against the senator's campaign finance bill. Hunch sparked a hypothesis. Whitaker and Dunn issued denial statements. Local anchors played both sides, no evidence yet connecting donors to the shooter. The firm's CEO, a silver-tongued man named Evan Whitaker, declared, "We condemn violence in the strongest terms." Yet when Maya called for comment, she noticed a careful omission. Their public statements repeated the term "no connection," but financial rolls showed a handful of opaque, last-minute transfers to groups aligned with Whitaker's position. The underdog's problem was that these transfers were hidden by shell accounts. The powerful bury their tracks like gardeners, and you needed patience and the right shovel to find roots. Then a breakthrough. A grainy rooftop surveillance clip surfaced where, for one terrible, zoomed second, a person appeared on a neighbor's ledge. Maya cross-referenced timestamps, mail cameras, and an insurance bill. The account that paid the bill tied back to a foundation with board seats occupied by, yes, Whitaker and Dunn donors. When she brought this pattern to her editor, a veteran who'd long taught her the rules of proof, he said, "You need more than correlation, kid. You need a smoking gun." But a smoking gun, she insisted, can be built from enough small sparks. She found the gun receipt in a small rural porn journal via a tip. It was bought under the name of a shell company that matched a contractor who'd been seen on the rooftop earlier. The contractor worked projects for Whitaker and Dunn. Someone wanted to make sure the contractor's connection looked like coincidence, but lists and ledgers are stubborn once the light hits them. Maya published a piece titled, "A Roof, a Receipt, a Repeating Pattern. Why We Can't Ignore Links to Whitaker and Dunn." The story rippled. It didn't accuse. It asked questions, laid records, and let the ledger speak. Tight lines of money went from shell accounts to third-party crews. Crews rented spaces with permits approved by a municipal office whose manager had political ties to the firm. The story used nothing but statements, public ledgers, and video timestamps. Yet the implication was clear. Whitaker and Dunn lawyers sued for defamation. National contenders scoffed. The governor's office called for calm. But in living rooms, a new fear. What if this had been arranged? Political enemies rushed in to protect the firm. But public outrage, not the boardroom, began to shift the balance. Students staged sit-ins at the town hall. Donors began pulling funding. One city council member resigned amid reports of hush money transfers. Evan Whitaker's once untouchable name cracked. The real power flip came when a whistleblower, a low-level employee at Whitaker and Dunn, named Thomas Rivera, reached out to the ledger. He'd run internal logs and, terrified, had kept duplicates. He handed Maya an encrypted flash drive with emails arranging security that matched rooftop permits and invoices. The emails repeated a phrase, "Ensure visibility is minimized." It read like a gardener's instruction to hide the roots. The press called it a smoking foxhole, a small victory, but heavy. Civil suits, criminal probes, and a national manhunt converged. Investigations widened past the campus. Federal indictments for conspiracy were filed. Evan Whitaker was forced to step down while subpoenas clawed at his firm's accounting. The rooftop contractor was arrested. The court proceedings rolled out in public sobs and legal maneuvers. In one of the hearings, the camera panned to the defendant, a nervous contractor found to have funneled funds via shell companies, the same contractor who'd rented the roof for that fatal day. In the gallery sat Senator King's widow, Ariana, who'd turned grief into a legislative push for transparency in political donations. It was, in the language of crowds, poetic justice. The firm that tried to buy silence now had to answer in the courtrooms that had once seemed closed. A year later, Maya spoke on a stage at a journalism conference. She was no longer an intern or a junior reporter. She was a voice for the city's underdogs. She told students about ledger lines, persistence, and the importance of documents. Power buries itself in paperwork, she said. It thinks those ledgers will never be read. But when boredom becomes stubbornness, when someone like you reads the fine print and refuses to look away, justice becomes possible. Not always immediate, and not always complete, but possible. And the cost of complacency is too high. The crowd cheered. She thought of Ariana, walking into the Senate chamber and pressing for new laws on shell corporations. She thought of the contractor who'd sunk under the weight of evidence. She thought, quietly, of the senator's last speech, about a country that requires the courage to face hard things. But the final twist came late that night, in the mailbox of Maya's apartment. An unmarked envelope slid through the slot. Inside, a single, crisp photograph of Maya at the courthouse, date and time stamped, and a typed line beneath, "You found our ledger. Now walk away." Maya's hand shook as she typed her editor. The man who'd taught her to follow records told her, "We'll go public. We'll go louder." His voice was steady, but he had the quiet of someone who'd been watched too. A second envelope arrived the next day at the office, a photograph of Ariana's home, taken from down the street. The note this time, "Stop digging or the next print will be on someone else's steps." If the powerful could be brought low by paper and persistence, the powerful could also strike back. Maya realized the ledger had not simply exposed greed, it had exposed enemies who could reach and resist. When Maya went to the police, clutching the envelopes, they barely looked up. "It's harassment, not a crime," an officer said, his voice dripping with indifference. "They sent me surveillance photos," she snapped. "That's stalking. Unless there's violence or a direct threat, our hands are tied." Maya wanted to scream. Here she was, carrying evidence that tied billionaires to a senator's assassination, and the local police acted like she was reporting stolen mail. It was ironic. The very system Charles King had fought to reform was the same system shrugging while his journalist ally was targeted. Late that night, her phone rang again. But this time, the voice wasn't mocking. "You don't know me, but I know your work," said a man who introduced himself only as Redwood. His tone was clipped, military, but his words pulsed with urgency. "You've rattled Whitaker and Dunn. I used to work private security for them. I've seen the ledgers you're chasing. They're bigger than you think." Maya's heart thudded. "Why tell me this?" "Because I was ordered to burn files that tied them to a Black Ops surveillance unit. I couldn't. I kept copies." "Why me?" she asked. "Because every other journalist in this state is already compromised. You're the only one stubborn enough to keep publishing." Redwood dropped a flash drive at a dead drop, an old mailbox at the edge of town. Maya retrieved it just before dawn, her hands trembling as she slipped it into her laptop. What she found wasn't just incriminating. It was devastating. Dozens of emails detailed operations budgets, payments routed through shell NGOs, and encrypted memos referencing Stage 2 containment. One file contained blueprints of Western Ridge University, with the rooftop where the sniper fired circled in red weeks before the assassination. But the most chilling file was a memo signed with initials, E.W., Evan Whitaker himself. It read, "Ensure finality. King cannot be allowed to advance transparency legislation. Ledger risks exposure of donors." Maya gasped. This wasn't conspiracy, it was confession. 2 nights later, as Maya drove home from the newsroom, headlights flared in her rearview mirror. A black SUV tailed her, inching closer until its bumper nearly kissed hers. She swerved, panic crawling up her throat. The SUV cut in front of her, forcing her off the road into a dirt pullout. 4 men stepped out, their faces hidden under caps. One rapped on her window with a gloved fist. "Ledger girl," the tallest one sneered. "You don't know how to quit." "I know how to publish," she shot back, voice quivering but steady. Another leaned closer. "Next time, it won't be pictures." But just as the tension peaked, headlights appeared behind them, another car screeching to a halt. Out stepped Redwood, pistol drawn. "You've made your point," he barked at the men. "Now walk." The men hesitated. Then, with a final glare at Maya, they retreated into the SUV and peeled away. Her hands shook on the wheel. She had just stared into the eyes of the people who thought intimidation was justice. Frank Delgado urged caution. "If you publish that memo, Maya, you'll be their #1 target." "I already am," she whispered. They argued for hours. But Maya knew the truth. Journalism dies in silence. By dawn, she uploaded a story titled "The Whitaker Memo," proof the assassination was no accident. The internet exploded. Hashtags trended overnight. Cable pundits debated its authenticity. Evan Whitaker went on live TV, red-faced, calling it a fabrication by a rogue reporter. But the public wasn't convinced. Too many dots lined up. Too much had already leaked. The underdog had shifted the battlefield. Under mounting pressure, Congress convened an emergency hearing. Maya was summoned to testify. She stood in front of polished oak tables, staring down senators who looked at her like she was either savior or saboteur. "Ms. Hollis, are you asserting that a billion-dollar firm orchestrated the assassination of a sitting senator?" one demanded. "I'm not asserting," she replied firmly. "I'm presenting their own documents. They spoke for themselves." The room buzzed. Cameras flashed. For once, Maya wasn't the one underestimated. She was the one holding the room hostage, with truth. Days later, federal agents raided Whitaker and Dunn offices. Boxes of shredded paper, encrypted servers, and offshore accounts were seized. Evan Whitaker was arrested on charges of conspiracy, obstruction, and racketeering. Reporters swarmed Maya, calling her the rookie who cracked the state's biggest cover-up. Ariana King embraced her publicly, thanking her for finishing what her husband started. For one shining moment, it felt like justice had won. The underdog had triumphed. But victory came at a cost. Redwood vanished without a trace. Maya's apartment was broken into, laptop smashed, notes stolen. Anonymous callers threatened her family. One night, she returned home to find a red X spray-painted on her door. Another warning. Another game of fear. Frank urged her to leave town. Disappear for a while. You've done enough. But Maya shook her head. Truth doesn't stop when one man is arrested. There's always someone else holding the strings. Just when Maya thought she'd cut the head off the snake, another shadow emerged. A leaked court filing revealed a mysterious figure referred to only as the benefactor. According to prosecutors, Whitaker answered to someone even higher, a financier with international ties. The benefactor's name was scrubbed from every document, but one hint surfaced, a series of payments originating from a Swiss account labeled Kraken17. Maya realized with a sinking stomach, Whitaker was only the middleman. The real power, the real assassin's patron, was still out there. At a candlelight vigil for Senator King, Maya spoke softly into a microphone. They tried to bury the truth under ledgers, bullets, and fear. But here's the thing about truth. It grows in the dark. It finds its way to light. And the underdog? The underdog only needs one spark to set the fire. The crowd wept. They chanted King's name. For a moment, grief turned into solidarity. The next morning, Maya found another envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a bank transfer from Kraken17 to a US Political Action Committee. Scrawled across the page in red ink, "You exposed the pawn. Are you ready to meet the king?" Her heart pounded. The story wasn't over. It had only just begun. To be continued. If you're still watching, you know how deep this story goes. The threats, the ledgers, the cover-ups, it's far from over. Subscribe to the Untold Struggles right now so you don't miss the moment Maya faces the true mastermind. Truth has a cost, but silence has a higher one. If you believe underdogs deserve a voice, like, comment, share, and subscribe to the Untold Struggles. Part 2 will reveal who the benefactor really is, and why Senator King's death was only the first move in a much bigger game.